Bernie, we're right. All right. Well, good morning, councillors. Good morning, members of the team in the gallery, members of the community in the gallery, and also members of the community viewing in on live stream. Welcome to our 2021 budget meeting. Can I just acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, the Turrumbal people, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We have no opening prayer today, councillors, but we acknowledge there's full attendance. There are no leaves of absence or apologies. There are no declarations of interest in matters on the agenda that I've been made aware of. There are no public forums or deputations. No business arising or outstanding from previous meetings, as this is a special meeting of council to bring the budget down, and there are no presentation of petitions, and there are no councillor or delegate reports, and nothing from the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee as well. So we'll go to item 10, councillors, and before we jump into the reports per se, can I just offer my congratulations to all of the councillors, irrespective of the outcome today. It's been a long process for all of us. It's been a lot of work for all of us. We've had meetings, I think, essentially since October last year, a number of workshops. We've had reports, we've had briefings, and we've had lots of different things to consider. And so my congratulations to you in getting to this point, and also to Andrea Ellis, our Chief Financial Officer, and her team for their significant hard work during all of this process. And bringing down a budget is not a simple task. As I said, we've been at this for the last 9 months, and probably Andrea's team has been at it prior to that. And certainly I just wanted to acknowledge your work, councillors, and also the work of the team. It is significant. I'm particularly excited about this budget, councillors, because, as you know, we've put ourselves in a position where we want to remove ourselves from the category of being one of the highest rated councils in Queensland, and I think this budget going forward, assuming it's adopted today, will go a long way to doing that. So on that, I'm going to pass over to the Chief Financial Officer, Andrea Ellis, to deliver 10.1, the operational plan for 21-22. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks, Mayor. The first report on our agenda today is the operational plan for 21-22. The operational plan is the strategic document which identifies the one-year deliverables that the organisation is going to deliver and has prepared its budget around supporting. There are 100 key performance measures that have been identified for delivery over the next 12 months. These will also be reported upon at a quarterly interval to councillors as part of the ongoing performance reporting. All of the KPIs that are identified in the operational plan do align with the corporate plan and support the outcomes identified within the community plan. I'm happy to take any questions from the councillors on the operational plan.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Andrea. On page 20 of it states 2.2.4 support the growth of education and employment opportunities for the community. It states no action for this year. Was there a reasoning behind that particular one?
So this does align, so the 2.2.4 is one of the outcomes and deliverables identified in the 10-year corporate plan. So in some instances, there will be no actions identified within the 1 year tranche, but there is still ongoing oversight and monitoring of the outcome, of working towards that outcome within the 10-year period. So for this particular coming financial year, there isn't any specific action that aligns with that specific outcome or deliverable.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? All right, well, in the absence of questions, we'll go to the officer's recommendation that council adopts the annual operational plan for the 21-22 financial year in accordance with section 174 of the Local Government Reg 2012. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Mover, Councillor Mello, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Mello, do you wish to speak to the recommendation?
Just very briefly, certainly keen to support the resolution before us. It's critical that we We fund the organisation to carry out the day-to-day works that are the goals and the aspirations of this council to deliver to the community, the services and the standards that they love and appreciate. So, and I look forward to it empowering the entire organisation to carry out the significant work that they do on behalf of this community. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mello. Anyone wishing to speak against?
Yes.
Councillor Maida? Microphone.
I'm just making note, Mr Mayor, that while we're looking at 10-year plans and yearly plans, that I'm told that some of the requests that I've made, simple requests, are going to take at least 12 to 13 years. Just an observation, Mr Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Maida. Anyone else wish to speak for the recommendation? Okay. Anyone else against? Councillor Hutton?
Last year I commended the 2021 operational plan to the council and highlighted how the plan outlines the KPIs we have in seeking both realistic yet aspirational desires to see Livingstone progress along the roadmap to 2050. The annual operating plan is no tick the box exercise, but rather a strategic link back to our Livingstone 2050 community plan vision and the integrated 10-year corporate plan. While I offer my thanks to the officers for the work they've undertaken to set goals, I am unsatisfied that our goals meet the aspiration reflecting the desire of council to see progress along the road to 2050, and therefore I will not be supporting its adoption today.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Anyone else speaking for? Anyone against? All right, councillors, we'll wrap up debate on this one. We have a mover in Councillor Mello, a seconder in Councillor Eastwood. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 4, 3. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 10.2, Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, report 10.2 is presentation of the revenue policy for 21-22. This is a principles-based policy and identifies all of the components that council's aspirations in terms of how we're going to be raising our revenue, not only from our rates and charges, but also the principles that underlie our application for fees and charges as well. This particular policy was extensively reviewed in June 2019. And because of that, the policy is largely unchanged, apart from updating for a financial year, compared to what was adopted by council in the previous budgets. I'm presenting it for consideration by the table.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to the policy? Okay. I have a mover in Councillor Hutton. Thank you, Councillor Hutton. A seconder, please. I'm happy to second, Justine. Councillor Hutton, did you wish to speak to the recommendation?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. Just very quickly, in endorsing the revenue policy for 21-22, I think it importantly outlines the values and the principles that we as a community aspire for. So it talks about equity for like properties, it talks about user pays, it talks about making a meaningful contribution, it talks about predictability for residents and ratepayers, and it talks about fairness. I think the aspiration of both the organisation and the councillors here in this room is reflected in those 5 principles, and therefore I endorse this policy for its inclusion as part of the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Anyone speaking against the recommendation? Would anyone like to speak for? All right, so we'll wrap up debate, councillors. We've got a mover in Councillor Hutton, a seconder in myself. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 10.3, the revenue statement, Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I talk too much about the revenue statement, I would just like to clarify with the council as in regards to the point of the revenue statement as well as the subsequent number of resolutions that need to be made. So the legislation does require a number of very specific and separate resolutions that constitute components of the revenue statement. And so these are referred to from reports 10.5 to 10.13. The revenue statement reflects all of these resolutions that will be made subsequent to the adoption or consideration by the table of the revenue statement. The revenue statement as a whole is essentially the explanatory document which is used to guide the application of the policies that were just adopted by council from the revenue policy and how they're going to be applied from all of our various components of our revenue strategy, which includes the particular rating strategy, our utility charges, recovery of unpaid debts, as well as how we grant rebates and concessions. So it provides the very detailed components about how all of those various elements of the rating strategy are to be applied by council. Each year, because of the length of the particular document, it does go through a very extensive review process, and that was well workshopped and understood by the councillors in terms of all of the various changes. I won't talk in too much detail at this point about the various components of that, because they will be discussed again in reports 10.5 to 10.14. It is worthy to note that this revenue statement does also underpin the budget and long-term financial forecast. So the decisions made as part of this revenue statement are taken into consideration for our 10-year financial plan as well. I'm happy to take any questions from the councillors.
All right. Thank you, Madam CFO. Any questions of the Chief Financial Officer, councillors? All right. Councillors, I'm going to move this one. Seconded Councillor Friend, thank you. All right, so notwithstanding, councillors, that this report is adopted in its own right, but there are individual reports through from 10.5 basically through to 10.14 which support this, and that's required by legislation and has been since 2018. For members of the community, members of the gallery, I'll just provide some summary comments, if I can, in terms of what this document is now saying. What we'll end up with, councillors and members of the community, is essentially a 0% increase in general rates. We'll have a 0% increase in levies, in other words, the road levy, the environmental levy and the disaster management levy. We will have a 1% decrease in the rates for large residential allotments. We will have on average a 0.4% reduction in residential rates across the board. We will have going forward with the water system an equalisation of the water charges across the 4 water schemes of council, and we will be adjusting the 3-tier water charging system to a 2-tier water charging system. So in very general terms, that's what the revenue statement is addressing. It also addresses the fact that we have maintained the 10% discount on our rates, the rebate for pensioners is still maintained at $300, and the interest on overdue rates is maintained at 7%. So hopefully, councillors and members of the community, there'll be some good news in that for you, because we are very serious, as I said, about attempting to do the right thing by our community and also by this council. We've been able to achieve this through a number of service level reviews. So we've asked the officers to go away on several occasions and look at the review, at their activities, look at their service levels, ask the questions: do we need to maintain the service level at its current level? Can we reduce it? Can we eliminate it? Can we outsource it? And that has come back to the table here a couple of times. And with full credit to the officers, they've undertaken this task, and we've generated a number of efficiencies through this process. So that's the reason, members of the community and councillors, that we are able to, in this particular instance, deliver a 0% rate increase for our general rates. I think going forward, though, councillors, we need to be aware that this won't be necessarily a continuing trend. We have to look at each year as it comes across the table and what the officers present to us. But certainly for 21-22, it's a good news story, I think, for the community, because it essentially means that across the board in the residential categories, there's a 0.4% reduction. Now, that's not going to happen in every single case. Some people will get their rates notice and it will increase. Now, that may be because of a number of things. In the urban areas in particular, and we've mentioned this a number of times in the media, the fire levy will increase. Now, that's not controlled by council, as you know, councillors. That's controlled by the Queensland Fire and Emergency Service. They levy that charge. We are just the gatekeeper on that particular charge. We receive the money from the community and we send it straight to QFIS. So that will be one reason why some people's rates will increase. So we ask the community just to be mindful of those things when they get their rates notice. We are saying that across the board in the residential categories, it's a 0.4% reduction, but some people will be different. There'll always be outliers and reasons for differences from the average. But on average, it's a 0.4% reduction. All right, councillors, I've had my say. Is anyone speaking against the resolution? Councillor Maida?
May I say first up, I endorse your comments, Mayor, in relation to the hard work that's been put in by the officers and by the councillors to get to this point in time. And I'd pay special recognition to Andrea's team because they've had to go back time and time again to bring us the figures that we have today, which on the face of it are exciting. Mr. Mayor, when we came to office 15 months ago, we were excited because we were embarking on new dreams, new administration, new thoughts, new plans. And we were dealing with some pretty tough stuff. I'd seen some difficulties in the past over the years, but I believe I knew how to deal with those head on. Talk it through with your colleagues, deal with the issues that need to be dealt with, put all your side stuff in the past, but just look forward. Mr. Mayor, during that time, it wasn't long before I could see the cracks appearing in my side of the fence. And I didn't get the support that I needed to do what I had to do. And I'm talking about the people closest to me who need to give me that support. While I've got a $6.4 million budget just on roads alone, almost 1,500 kilometres of road network, 830 of those are rural roads. And I'm told that I'm not going to get some gravel on a hill to the cattle trucks safely down the other side. And I'm not going to get a load of gravel on a black spot on a road. And I'm not going to have a culvert for 12 to 13 years on one that gets washed out regularly. If I can't deliver on the simple things, I've got Buckleys of doing anything else here. And the sad part about it, Mr. Mayor, the people, the very people who were paid to look after my interests, and my interests are their interests, and that's the general public. They need something for their money. One of those little issues that nobody else knows about. But I go to bed at night and I think about it because I can't deliver. I'd have to say the councillors stood up to the mark when I asked them to. Because when I put it to my department that I need help and that help's not coming, I go upstairs. And when I don't get help from upstairs, I come to you and you delivered. If I have to do that every time, I will do it. I'm not used to having it easy. I'm not asking for anything over the top. I'm just asking for the very basic things that people expect and deserve from us who pay our wages. We've got a culture here, Mr. Mayor. We knew that when we first came here. And I believe that culture's still here. And we've got to dig it out. I'm not going to make any bones about this. People have got to realise why they're here. And councillors, we're not in an easy game. We're the meat in the sandwich. Because the people turn to us when they can't get any satisfaction elsewhere. And we can't always deliver, but we rationalise what they're asking. And they're the little things that make the difference to our people, your people. While everybody thinks they're doing their job, they need to look sideways and see the difficulties others are having just doing those little things. Because the day I can't deliver, I'll walk away. And I'm not used to walking away. I'm used to putting people on the mat and making them stand up to the job. And that's all I ask. The dreams that we had 15 months ago, they're still there. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to the future. And this is a budget, Mr. Mayor, that any council throughout Queensland would just love to bring down today. And I would have loved to have been with it. When I had to go back and tell my people, I can't get you that load of gravel because they told me it's only got 5 vehicles on the road. Another one says doesn't have a house. Well, that little hill that I've been looking for some work on, it hasn't happened as of 2 days ago. Still hasn't happened. I've been asking for several months. And yet these people, they own 3 cattle properties in our shire and they deliver gravel to us at no cost from their own personal quarry. Don't you think they deserve some satisfaction too? Couldn't even get a load of gravel from their own pit. Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to go on because other people have more positive things to say. But I'm telling you the truth. And I'd thank Nige Deacon too for his very open and very basic but very honest report in the Mount Charlton Reservoir. Because like a lot of our infrastructure, it's been neglected over time. And it's going to cost us a lot of money, $700,000 for a valve for every, 8 or 9 valves that are still to come? So it's a big price that we're going to have to pay because of that neglect. But now that we've identified all of the matters that we need to deal with, all of the new infrastructure that we have is falling to pieces, we've got big jobs to fill. And that's going to take money, and that's going to take restraint. It's going to take sacrifice, and it's going to take determination and cooperation from every one of us at this table and beyond in our offices. I can't do it on my own, but I know you've all got aspirations as well, and I'm supporting all of you in yours. So please have some consideration to the difficulties I'm having just providing basic services. And in last note, Mr. Mayor, I know I'm going over and you're very patient with me. As a protest, I've stood back from my portfolio and my meetings with my portfolio managers because I was not getting the satisfaction, not getting the support. Michael, thankfully, is a fresh face and he has been helpful of late. But he has got a lot to learn.
Councillor Maida, can I just, sorry to interrupt you, can we just perhaps leave personalities out of this? And I think some of these issues you're dealing with could well be taken up internally within the organisation.
Mr. Mayor, I did take them up internally and it didn't work. But I'm just saying now, I stood back from my voice panel because I couldn't deliver to them. So why should I expect them to trust me? That's all I need to say, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Maida. Is anyone speaking for the resolution? Councillor Friend, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a property owner and a ratepayer in our beautiful Shire, it gives me great pleasure to speak for this revenue statement. And after months and months of deliberation, we as a collective have discussed and worked through many scenarios in an attempt to reduce and ease the burden of our ratepayers. In the election of 2020, I sincerely wished for change to lessen the financial burden, whilst at the same time continuing to strive for best practice and quality of service. I'm so pleased that we can now state unequivocally that we have taken the first step to keep the majority of our rating categories static. No rises, no change, no consumer price index. In fact, it is an absolute honour to state that in the rating categories of L15 to L18, being large residential 1 to 4, have actually reduced in order to create parity in line with the other rating categories. As Mr Mayor has previously said, the road network levy and the environmental levy have also remained the same and not increased by the consumer price index, for which all councils must take into consideration. The Queensland State Government Emergency Levy that is collected by council on their behalf has been increased by the state. And it was important for me to note for those watching and for our community that ratepayers within Livingstone would have received a letter from the state government advising of the $47 increase per annum. You'll see this on your rates notice. Council keeps not $1 of this emergency levy. This increase is not a council decision. Having no increase in our rating categories is an achievement that has not happened since de-amalgamation. We will continue to search for innovative ways to save all ratepayers the extra burden of the continual rises. We will scrutinise our service levels without any detriment to the community. These fundamental changes do not happen with the stroke of a pen. It has taken 6.5 years of constant increases to bring us where we are today. And I urge all of Livingstone Shire to celebrate our first zero rate rise in the rating categories. I'd like to finish with my sincere thanks to my fellow members, Mr Mayor, Mr CEO, the executive leadership team, all staff of Livingstone Shire Council, and particularly my appreciation for her commitment, patience, candour and education, Madam Chief Financial Officer Andrea Ellis and her dedicated team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Hutton?
I will be speaking against, but just before I do, can I ask a question of the CFO?
Please do.
Just looking for confirmation. Is there a fee for service attached to our collection? While it's not a choice, we don't have the choice to collect the fee from the emergency services. For the emergency services levy, is there a fee attached to that? Just to
Council receives a very small commission to cover the administrative costs associated with maintaining this on behalf of the state government.
Thank you very much. In speaking against the revenue statement, one of the things with the new formatting of the budget, with the range of motions that we'll go through this afternoon or this morning, is that it allows us to be nuanced in our approach to identifying things where there are both positives and negatives, and it allows us to take and break down a budget as opposed to in the past where there may have been this in globo motion of everything. This allows us to be more nuanced. Now, there are, as has been said by both the Mayor and Councillor Friend and even Councillor Maida in her comments, great things as part of this budget, and I will speak to them and speak very proudly of the efforts that they're made. However, there are some things where I do wish we were able to achieve change, or where there's something that I think that we need to work on, and I'll identify them and speak to them as the time comes. So in dealing with this in globo motion, which is then reflected in a series of nuanced smaller parts, I speak against it, recognising that I will be speaking against some parts of the program of issues that we'll be dealing with later on in the agenda. I also think it's important to note that we are on a price path to achieve parity for our large residential lots. However, the differential between what a large res versus res lot pays is somewhere in the realms of about 5%. This budget does reduce that by 1%, but there is still a 4% gap that has to be achieved over a series of years. So while we are on a price path to parity, I think for the certainty and the understanding of the community, I wouldn't want them to think tomorrow that someone who had a $255,000 lot at Cooey Bay was paying the same rates as someone who had a $255,000 lot at Glendale. The reality is that's not the case. There is still a differential there. However, that differential is smaller than it was last year, and with the promises that this budget has made over the forward estimate, it will get to a point where in 3 years or 3 to 5 years' time, where we'll achieve parity for those two res and large res lot sizes.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Pardon me. Pardon me. Anyone wish to speak for the resolution? Councillor Eastwood.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I just want to thank you, Councillor Maida, for your comments, which certainly haven't gone over my head and certainly resonate with some of us. Look, the revenue statement is a working document. the nuts and bolts of the revenue policy. And we spent a lot of time on this. The officers have spent a lot of time on this, and I believe that we've come up with some good direction and some good outcomes. Notwithstanding something that I've been very strong against since my first election is keeping rates at a 0%, and I'm very excited about that. And I just want to thank my fellow councillors and the CFO and staff for helping us come to that. I endorse this document, and I think it puts us in stead and puts us in the right direction for the future, especially for 21-22. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Anyone speaking against? Anyone else wish to speak for? Councillor Mello.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow councillors. There's many upsides to this budget and there's some downsides to the budget, and that is quite often the case with probably all budgets, whether it's a family budget, whether it's a business budget, whether it's a council budget. The upsides of this budget is that there's been a concerted effort here amongst all councillors with the support of staff to identify how can we recalibrate the rate, grind down the rates in some way to try and reflect affordable rates. It was no secret that our rates at Livingstone were in the top 5 in Queensland, some say the second highest, certainly right up there. To continue on even at CPI increase would mean that we would hover around that bracket for a long time to come. And so the result of that is that we've endeavoured to grind that CPI increase down to what we've landed on, which is a 0% rate rise, which is not something we're doing necessarily to just get a pat on the back and be popular with everybody. It's more about recognising that our community is, whilst it's growing rapidly, it's also, for many people, it's difficult to meet the weekly costs. With the cost of living and rates becoming a significant part of that. We want equity in our rates. We want all people to be able to enjoy living in this wonderful region, which I believe is the greatest council in Queensland. And I believe we've got the greatest future of any council in Queensland. There are certainly areas that we need to address and focus more on. All of us have got our areas of our portfolios and our areas of interest and areas of passion. But this budget achieves truly an affordable rate for people to have to come up with. And that's the upsides of it. So I'm very humbled to be part of a team that has recognised the sentiments coming through the community. Some of the downsides of this budget, which there are some, introducing a green waste charge will be something that people will perhaps be frustrated by. But understanding that we're moving towards more a user pays methodology, and it does cost to process green waste at our council waste facilities, the charge is very low. But to some it will be a downside. But collectively here we've tried to look at ways we can increase the upsides and make it affordable to live in this wonderful region, and to mitigate the downsides of the budget. So I thank my fellow councillors for their contribution. I think we have an exciting future in Livingstone, and this budget, it really reflects the attitudes of the community. And I'm very proud to be able to do that on behalf of them. And I thank the Mayor for his guidance through this process. To have a Mayor with an accountancy background has been very, very helpful and very reassuring to have that stable guidance there, in association with our terrific staff who have tried to provide the most forthright information to us, so we knew exactly what we were doing and why we were doing it. And I look forward to presenting this to the community. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Councillor Mello. Any other comments, councillors, before we wrap up debate? All right, well, I'll just wrap up, councillors, and again thank my colleagues and the staff for the work they've put into this. It's been significant. As a number of councillors have alluded to, and Councillor Mello just mentioned, normally what happens to maintain your current position financially is when CPI increases, normally you increase your rates, or if you're a business, your pricing to reflect the additional costs to your business. Council has elected not to do that this time. CPI is around about 1.1% at the moment. We are not charging for CPI. We're not increasing our rates by CPI this time round. We are absorbing that cost. And we are doing that, as I mentioned earlier, because of service level reviews and efficiencies, and a couple of other measures that have been put in place to allow us to maintain our position without adding CPI onto the rates. As Councillor Hutton correctly points out, we are on a 5-year path to a number of things. We are on a 5-year path to rating equalisation. We are on a 5-year path to water system equalisation and water charging equalisation. So this year will be the first year of a number of years going forward where we will be changing charges to bring us into line with common practice across a number of areas in water. So councillors, the positive news on the 10-year forecast, as you would have seen, some councils and the department and the Queensland Audit Office sometimes get nervous when councils bring in 0% rate increases. But if you look at our 10-year forecast going forward, we have a very healthy cash balance. We are maintaining maintaining surpluses. A positive surplus is a double superlative, but we are maintaining surpluses, and our revenue continues to increase. So for mine, a good position, and as what Councillor Friend and Councillor Maida have said, would be the envy of a number of councils across Queensland. So I'm not necessarily patting ourselves on the back, but certainly I thank you for your works. We've got a lot more to do. And so on that basis, councillors, we'll go to the vote. I've got a mover and myself, a seconder and Councillor Friend. All in favour? You're right. Can I have the vote? All in favour? Sorry again. Okay. And all those against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. 10.4, Madam Chair, Madam CFO, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, as part of today's suite of budget reports, we're also presenting the fees and charges to be applied from 1st of July 2021. So in order for Council to hold or reduce the general rate revenue, it has required a combination of a number of different things, including increases to a large range of commercial fees, which are included in the fees and charges report. Not-for-profit or community type fees had a very minimal change overall with their various increases. The other significant change that is included in the fees and charges report, which has been mentioned by councillors this morning, is around the change for our green waste charging. So this is really to reflect the community plan goal to enhance the reuse and recycling of resources that is identified in the community plan. But to facilitate this, Council, the fees and charges that are being presented today is introducing a standard charging regime for green waste, of which waste vouchers will also be able to be redeemed instead of in lieu of a fee payment. It also provides for provision of free standard grade mulch, which is included in the fees and charges, which is a change from historical practices. Happy to take any questions from the councillors on the fees and charges presented today.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Any questions, councillors? All right, Councillor Bello, this is your portfolio. Would you like to move this one?
Yep, happy to move this one, Mr. Chair.
Seconded, Councillor Friend. Thank you. Councillor Bello, would you like to speak to the report?
Yeah, just briefly. This has been one of those arduous efforts to go to the fees and charges. They're not sexy by any means, but they're critically important. That we're pitching these, you know, at either cost recovery or in a way that is fair and reasonable to the community. So that if you go to the landfill, you know, and the number of phone calls that I'm sure many other councillors and myself, perhaps Councillor Friend more so now with her portfolio, that it may be the cost to dump a refrigerator now. Why is it $8 or whatever the case may be? And the answer is there's a cost. There's a cost in degassing it. That's why you've got to pay for it. So all of those sorts of charges are calculated. They're not just plucked out of thin air. There's a science behind them, which is informed through the professional staff that that are entrusted with managing those various business models. And so that's reflected in these fees and charges. And as I said, the green waste will be one I'm sure that members of the public may be frustrated by.